before the private jets, before the Milan showrooms and the magazine covers, before their faces sat on billboards along the Lagos-Ibadan expressway with the words, "Haba made, World Won," written boldly beneath them. Before all of that, there were two boys sitting on an overturned bucket in Oriara Market, Haba, sorting buttons into old milk tins. One of them was Kelechi Nwosu. The other was Obinechukwu. If you had walked past them in 1999, you would not have looked twice. Two skinny boys, no older than 9, covered in thread dust, working for Papa Is, the tailor whose shop was really just 4 wooden poles and a zinc roof at the corner of Fox Road. Kelechi's mother sold pepper soup meat 3 stalls away. Obina's mother was dead, and his father drank more than he worked, so the boy came to Papa Isa's shop not for training, but because it was warmer than home, and because Kelechi shared his lunch with him. That is how it started. Not with ambition. With a boy sharing Gary with another boy who had none. "You will be rich one day," Obine told Kelechi once, chewing slowly, watching the tailors move like dancers around the machines. "And when you are rich, you will forget me," Kelechi had laughed. "I cannot forget the person who taught me how to whistle." They shook on it, a childish, spit-on promise that neither of them, at 9 years old, understood the weight of. "We will build something together. And whatever it is, we will build it as one." Neither of them knew that promise would one day nearly destroy them both. Now, viewer, I must take you back further than 1999. I must take you back to 1978, to 2 other young men who once sat exactly where Kelechi and Obina sat, Papa Isa's own workshop, when it was owned by a different man entirely, a tailor named Odegwu. Yes. Obina's grandfather, Odegwu, was the finest tailor in Haba in his generation. And his business partner, the man who put up half the capital to buy their first industrial sewing machines, was a quiet, careful young trader named Sunday Nwosu, Kelechi's grandfather. They built something good together, those 2 men. But in 1981, disaster struck. A fire, some say deliberate, lit by a jealous rival, burned down half the workshop. Odegwu, drowning in debt to the bank, borrowed a final, desperate sum from his partner Sunday to rebuild. It was a huge amount for that time. No paper was signed.
Pay me back.
Only a handshake, and the word of 2 men who trusted each other like brothers. Odegwu died in 1985, before the debt was repaid. His son, Obina's father, then just a teenager, inherited nothing but a half-burnt workshop and a silence nobody in the family ever explained to him. He grew up believing his family had simply been unlucky. He never knew a debt existed. He never knew his father died owing another man's family a fortune. Sunday Nwosu, for his part, never spoke of the debt again. He told his own son, Kelechi's father, only this: the Chukwus and the Nwosus are family. If you ever meet one of them, treat him like your own blood.
Nothing more.
He said nothing about money. Whether he forgave the debt out of grief, or simply gave up hope of ever collecting it, no one alive could say. He took that answer to his grave in 2003, so when young Kelechi shared his lunch with young Obina in 1999, neither boy knew that their grandfathers had once been business partners. Neither knew that an old, unspoken debt sat quietly between their families like a sleeping dog. They only knew that they liked each other. By 2008, Kelechi and Obina were young men, still inseparable, still working under different masters in Orioria, but always meeting in the evenings to talk about one thing: the shop they would own together. They saved for 6 years. Kelechi sold recharge cards on the side. Obina repaired generators. In 2014, with 430,000 naira between them, money that represented blistered hands and skipped meals, they rented a single-room shop and bought one industrial sewing machine, one wick generator, and enough ankara and cotton fabric to make 30 shirts. They called it twin thread. It was Obinna who had the eye for design, bold, daring cuts that made market women stop and stare. It was Kelechi who had the head for business, who understood pricing, who kept the account book balance to the last naira, who negotiated with the fabric sellers until they got the best rates in the market. Together, they were formidable. Alone, either of them would have failed within a year. Together, they were unstoppable. By 2017, Twin Thread had outgrown Orioria. They moved into a proper warehouse on Haba, Owerri Road. By 2019, a Lagos boutique owner discovered their designs at a trade fair and placed an order for 200 pieces. By 2021, Twin Thread, rebranded now as TT Haba, was showing at Lagos Fashion Week and international buyers from Accra, Johannesburg, and eventually London were placing six-figure dollar orders. By 2024, Kelechi and Obinna were no longer boys sorting buttons. They were co-founders of a fashion house worth billions of naira, employing over 400 tailors, seamstresses, and designers, most of them from the same streets of Haba where they themselves had grown up. They had done what almost no one from Orioria had ever done, built an empire, together, from nothing but thread and trust. They still finished each other's sentences. They still had a private joke about Gary and lunch. If you had asked either man, in early 2024, who his brother was, he would not have named a blood relative. He would have said the other's name. This is what makes what happened next so painful to tell. Every empire has a person circling it, waiting for a crack. For TT Haba, that person was Obinna's uncle, his late father's younger brother, a man named Chief Ferdinand Chukwu. Ferdinand had spent most of his life being the poorer, angrier brother. He had watched his nephew rise from nothing into unimaginable wealth, and something in him cuddled with every headline, every magazine cover, every new car in Obinna's compound. He wanted a piece of it. Not because he had earned it, but because, as he told himself late at night, drinking cheap gin on his veranda, the Chukwu name deserves this glory more than it has received. In early 2025, doing what bitter men often do, Ferdinand went digging through his late father Odigu's old papers. Searching for anything, land documents, certificates, anything he could use to insert himself into his nephew's success. And there, tucked into a Bible that had not been opened in decades, he found it, a single yellowed sheet of paper, water-stained, barely legible. A crude IOU. Odigu Chukwu's signature. A sum of money. The name Sunday Nwosu. Ferdinand did not go to Obinna immediately. He sat with that paper for 3 weeks, turning it over in his mind, shaping it into a weapon. He did not tell Obinna the full, complicated truth, that this was an old debt from a business partnership, possibly forgiven, possibly settled through decades of unspoken family kindness. Instead, he told his nephew a simpler, more poisonous story. Your grandfather's workshop did not burn down by accident, Ferdinand said, sitting across from Obinna in his Haba mansion one evening in March 2025, sliding the old paper across the table. The Nwosus set that fire. Then they forced your grandfather into a debt he could never repay, and when your father was too young to fight back, they let him drown in shame while their own family quietly prospered. And now look, the son of the man who destroyed our family sits beside you every day, smiling in your face, wearing half of what should have been entirely yours. None of it was true. There was no evidence of arson. There was no record of the death ever being forced. But Ferdinand told it with such conviction, such theatrical grief, that Obinna, exhausted from years of overwork, insecure beneath his success in ways even Kelechi never saw, and freshly stung by a recent disagreement over company shares, began to believe it. This is how betrayal is built. Not from nothing. From a half-truth, wrapped in real pain, handed to someone at the exact moment they are most tired, most doubtful, most ready to believe the worst about the person closest to them. You must understand, by 2025, TT Hubba was no longer just a friendship. It was a company with lawyers, a board, and 55% of its shares split almost evenly between the two founders, with Kelechi holding a slightly larger stake, 52 to Obinna's 48, a decision made years earlier simply because Kelechi had contributed a little more of the original starting capital. It had never mattered before. Now, poisoned by his uncle's story, it mattered to Obinna very much. Obinna began to change. Small things first. He stopped coming early to design meetings. He started taking calls from his uncle during work hours, his face tight and unreadable afterward. He began asking Kelechi strange questions. Why do you think your family did better than mine? Growing up. Did your father ever mention my father to you?
Did your father ever
Questions
mention my
Kelechi
father to
brushed
you?
off as exhaustion or stress,
Father, even
never
once.
once suspecting the storm building behind his best friend's eyes. Then, in June 2025, Obinna did something unthinkable. Quietly, without telling Kelechi, he met with a rival investment group, a Lagos conglomerate that had tried and failed twice before to acquire TT Hubba. He offered to sell his 48% stake, along with insider knowledge of the company's operations, in exchange for a guaranteed executive position and a payout large enough to, in his words to the investors, finally take what my family was always owed. He told himself it was justice. He told himself Kelechi's family had been living off a stolen inheritance for 40 years, and that this was simply balancing an old scale. He did not tell himself the truth, that his uncle was manipulating him, that grief and envy had been mistaken for righteousness, that he was about to destroy the one relationship in his life that had never once betrayed him. The deal was set to close in August. TT Hubba would be quietly gutted, its trade secrets and manufacturing contracts sold out from under Kelechi, who would be left holding 52% of a company suddenly worth a fraction of what it once was. Here, viewers, is where the story turns, where the suspense you have been feeling finally breaks open. In late July 2025, Kelechi's mother, now in her 70s, living comfortably in the family house Kelechi had built her in Hubba, fell ill. Kelechi, sitting beside her hospital bed, noticed something strange, an old wooden box she kept beneath her bed, one she had never let him open as a child. In the exhaustion and fear of that long night, she finally told him to bring it to her. Inside that box were his late father's business papers. And there, among receipts and old photographs, was a second document, a formal witness repayment record, dated 1994, showing that Sunday Nwosu's son, Kelechi's father, had personally, quietly, and completely repaid the old Choku family debt, plus an added sum for the hardship caused to Odegu Choku's widow, Obinna's own grandmother, years before Obinna was even born. It bore her thumbprint and the signature of a court clerk as witness. Kelechi's father had never spoken of it, not out of guilt, but out of the same quiet, old-fashioned dignity his own father had shown. You do not announce the debts you settle. You do not hold a kindness over anyone's head. It was, in the old man's eyes, simply the right thing to do, done and finished, not a story to be told. Kelechi sat in that hospital corridor at 2 a.m., staring at a document that explained everything, his best friend's strange coldness, the whispered phone calls, the sudden hostile questions about family history. And with a cold, sinking horror, he understood. Someone had told Obinna half of a story and left out the ending. He did not call Obinna that night. He knew, by now, that this was bigger than a phone call. He drove straight to the TT Harbor head office at dawn, requested the company's confidential shareholder correspondence log from their compliance officer, and found the draft acquisition agreement Obinna had been secretly negotiating, due to close in 11 days. His best friend was not just angry. His best friend was actively, deliberately, selling the empire out from under him. What would you have done, viewers? Screamed. Called the police. Gone straight to the newspapers to destroy the man who betrayed you. Kelechi did none of that. He called an emergency board meeting for the following evening, but told no one its true purpose. He simply asked Obinna to come early, to talk, like old times. Before the others arrived, they sat in the small back office of their very first Aurora shop, which they had kept, all these years, exactly as it was, as a shrine to where they'd started. 2 plastic chairs. 1 old sewing machine. The same milk tins, now empty, still sitting on the shelf. Kelechi placed 2 documents on the table between them. Ferdinand's old IOU, which Obinna's stunned face confirmed he recognized instantly. And beside it, the 1994 repayment record. Your uncle showed you half a story, Kelechi said quietly. I am showing you the other half. My father paid your grandmother back, with interest, 31 years ago. There was no fire started by my family. There was no stolen inheritance. There was a debt, and it was settled, quietly, the way our people used to settle such things, with honor, not headlines. Obinna could not speak. His hands shook over the old court document, verifying, in his grandmother's own thumbprint, that everything his uncle had told him was, at best, a dangerous half-truth, and at worst, a deliberate lie. I know about the buyers, Kelechi continued, and this time his voice cracked. I know what you were about to do to us. To the 400 families who work under this roof. To me. I built this with you because I trusted you before I trusted the numbers. And you were about to burn it all down over a debt that was paid before either of us was born. Obinna wept, the first time Kelechi had seen him cry since they were boys. He confessed everything, his uncle's manipulation, his own buried insecurity about always being the creative one, while Kelechi held the larger stake, the years of quiet resentment he had never once voiced honestly, letting it fester instead until a stranger's lie gave it a target. I was ready to destroy us, Obinna finally said, to prove I mattered as much as you. And it took almost losing everything to see that you never once made me feel like I didn't. The acquisition deal was cancelled with 4 days to spare. Kelechi and Obinna together, standing before the rival investors, withdrawing the offer as co-founders, presenting a united front that left the opportunistic buyers with nothing to take. Word of the reconciliation reached Chief Ferdinand Chukwu within a week, and it did not humble him. It enraged him. He had watched, from his veranda, as photographs of the 2 founders, arms around each other, laughing outside the old Aurora shop, circulated on social media under the caption, "Brotherhood survives." To Ferdinand, that photograph was not a happy ending. It was proof that his one chance at relevance, at wealth, at finally outgrowing his brother's shadow, had slipped through his fingers. And so, rather than accept defeat, he decided the fire had simply not burned hot enough the first time. He would light it again, this time with his own hands. Ferdinand's first move came in September 2025. He paid a struggling document forger in Hobart to produce a second IOU, a fabricated 1979 ledger page claiming Sunday Nwosu had, in fact, only repaid half of the original debt, with the supposed remaining balance that, adjusted for 40 years of compound interest, amounted to a staggering sum. He took this forged ledger to a court in Umuahia and filed a civil suit against Titi Hubba, demanding immediate settlement or seizure of company assets. It might have worked, except Ferdinand, in his arrogance, used the same forger to also alter the paper's aging process, soaking it in tea and scorching its edges with a candle to look authentic. The forger, a nervous man already known to the police for 2 prior document fraud cases, was easily traced. When Kelechi's legal team brought in a forensic document examiner, the ink was dated to a ballpoint pen formula that did not exist until the late 1990s, decades after the document claimed to be written. The case was thrown out of court in a single afternoon, and the presiding magistrate ordered an investigation into the ledger's origin. Humiliated but not finished, Ferdinand tried something far more dangerous. In October 2025, Titi Hubba was preparing its largest shipment yet, an 800-piece order bound for a flagship boutique in Milan, the company's first true entry into the European luxury market. Ferdinand secretly bribed a disgruntled quality control supervisor at the Hubba factory, a man recently passed over for promotion, to deliberately contaminate a portion of the fabric dilute with a corrosive chemical that would cause the garments to discolor and disintegrate weeks after delivery, timed perfectly to destroy the brand's reputation just as the Milan boutique's own press event went live. But greed makes men careless, and careless men leave trails. The supervisor, paid only half his promised bribe up front, grew anxious and began asking Ferdinand for the remaining balance over recorded phone lines, calls his own guilty conscience led him to make from a company landline that logged every outgoing number. When Titi Hubba's quality team caught the chemical irregularity during a routine pre-shipment inspection, the very inspection process Kelechi had insisted on doubling after the forged ledger scare, the contaminated batch was pulled before a single piece left Hubba. The supervisor, facing dismissal and prosecution, confessed everything in exchange for leniency and named Ferdinand as the man behind the bribe.
Exactly what to pour.
What came next unraveled quickly.
Money I never got.
Investigating the sabotage attempt, the police also reopened questions around the forged ledger case. And in digging through Ferdinand's financial history, they uncovered something he had buried for over 15 years. As treasurer of a local traders' cooperative society in the early 2010s, Ferdinand had quietly embezzled contributions from over 60 market women, blaming the shortfall on bad investments, and narrowly avoiding prosecution back then only because the victims lacked the money to pursue a long court battle. This time, Titi Hubba's legal team, and, more devastatingly, a determined group of the original cooperative society's members, now older but still owed their money, did not let it go quietly. Ferdinand was arrested, tried, and convicted on charges of attempted fraud, criminal conspiracy, and the decade-old embezzlement finally catching up to him. He forfeited his remaining properties, including the very mansion where he had once slid a lying IOU across the table to his nephew, in restitution to his victims, the stress of the trial, the public disgrace, and the collapse of everything he had spent a lifetime scheming to protect proved too much for his body. Ferdinand suffered a severe stroke during his sentencing hearing, leaving the left side of his body permanently weakened. He now lives in a small rented room on the outskirts of Hoba, cared for grudgingly by a niece who, unlike him, chose forgiveness over greed, visiting him not out of love, but out of the same quiet family duty his own father, Odegu Chukwu, had once shown to a struggling business partner 47 years earlier. The irony was not lost on anyone who heard the story. The very value his family once lived by, honor without expectation of reward, was the thing he had spent his final 3 years trying to destroy. Kelechi and Obinna did not simply return to how things were. They rebuilt something better. They restructured the company's shares to an even 50-50 split, not because the old percentage was ever truly unfair, but because Obinna needed, in his own words, to know I stand beside you, not beneath you. They created a foundation in both their fathers' names, the Odegu Sunday Legacy Fund, training young apprentices from Oriara Market who, like two boys sorting buttons in 1999, have nothing but hunger and talent to their name. They also, quietly and without press releases, made sure Ferdinand's stolen cooperative society funds were fully repaid to the market women who had waited 15 years for justice, not because they owed it, but because, as Obinna put it, someone in this family has to finally close the debt honestly. Today, Titi Hoba is one of the most recognized fashion houses to ever come out of West Africa. But if you ask Kelechi and Obinna what they are proudest of, they will not mention Milan, or Lagos Fashion Week, or the billboards. They will tell you about a wooden box under a hospital bed, a forged ledger that fooled no one, a poisoned dialogue that never left the warehouse, and a friendship that survived not one betrayal, but two, because truth, however many times it is attacked, has a way of outlasting the men who try to bury it. In the end, truth may take years to surface, but it always outlives the lies that try to bury it.